I haven't spoke with Francesca, but I just start as where she finished, because as the speech that she made and the issue that she taught is very interesting for me. So I'm taking a view, from, let's say, the consulting company, but let's say from the banks. Try to see the view from the industry. You can see also from, the academia or from somewhere else. But the point that I'm starting is, I just move, very quickly, a couple of slides, is this one. We said, okay, the system is more resilient, is more, let's say, is more safer. Yes, you see the capital position of the European banking sector has increased very, in a stronger way, and from, 8.4% at the beginning of the crisis, more than 14%. And how has reached this result? Of course, more capital, good idea, a good, let's say, good way, good move, and also reduction of risk. Risk WA is, at least 20% lower than that was before at the beginning of the crisis. So this is good news. So we have a banking sector, European banking sector, that is stronger in some way. We have differences among countries. We have, Italy, Spain, France, take the main countries, but the picture is more or less the same. Different, let's say, dynamics, but more or less is the same. So good capital injection and reduction in risk. Is this enough? This is the first question. And I come back later on this issue, just a couple of other slides. Liquidity position. The liquidity position is better than it was before. If we look at the liquidity position and the funding structure of the banking system in Europe, now we see more deposits position. Actually, we have lower, let's say, bond and security outstanding position. This is something that it might be that we have to worry about. Let's say we have to take into account, because we have MREL that is coming, and so we have, all the BRRD linked issue that we have to cover with. And I'm going back to another issue that I'm taking later. We have differences, very strong differences among the countries in measuring or using internal model for measuring risk WA, especially on credit risk. This is a picture that, is something that we have to, in some way, consider carefully, because when we compare the capital position among, different countries, we have to take into account these strong differences. And we have to move, and of course now there's the TRIM, okay, the process that, is going on in order to, let's say, have more convergence on this issue. But moving again, another issue, that is this one. This is, in my opinion, and I go straight, the main worry that today has the regulator, the investors, and the bank manager, is the return on equity gap. This banking sector, of course, is safer, let's say, it has more capital, has a good liquidity position, but has this very important gap in terms of, let's say, difference between the cost of equity, cost of capital, and the return on equity. This is one of the main issues, and I think that in order to, let's say, have a more stable, more resilient banking sector, we also have to deal with this issue. So we have to, let's say, make or do things, and this is not only a managerial issue, in order to close this gap. This gap is very wide in some banks. And then just get a look at a couple of these slides. These are estimates of cost of capital using all the market data, all the models that, the finance, let's say, econometrician, can put on. And then you can see that the cost of equity, first of all, going back, the cost of capital is still up there. around 10%. How comes? We have a less risky sector, but the cost of equity is still there. I don't have an answer on this, but there's something that is not working in the way of course, return on equity is lower, and so we have to find a way of profitability. If you look at different countries, different banking sectors, you see quite slight differences among the cost of equity, for example, of the German banking sector, and there's the risk factors in this model are also factors that are linked to the country position, of course, no? So, Germany has a stronger position than Italy in terms of debt and sustainability and so on and so forth. Spain, France, and then you see this gap are still, quite high. And one of the main issue I think that we have to deal with is to find a way to close this gap. And find a way to close this gap is reducing the cost of equity. How can we reduce the cost of equity? We have to reduce the risk. We have to make more de-risking that we have done so far. Where? In which direction? Credit risk, mortgage risk, where we reduce the risk. And we also have new risks that are coming. We also had before in this conference new type of risks that are coming and very important. They need in some way, if we use the same approach we did, and we have, let's say, capital as a first, of course, loss absorption. And then we have to improve the return on equity. And the return on equity is changing, of course, the business model. In an environment with low interest rates, net interest income is very, very low. And so the main, let's say, challenge that today the banking sector, the European banking sector is facing is this one. How to recover profitability in a medium, long-term sustainable manner. Otherwise, there's no way to stabilize, I think, the banking sector. And this is, I think, the main issue. And this is the main issue that let's say, the board of directors, the top managers, the banks are working on. So I'm skip, a lot of numbers that you should know, but in terms of, I'm going to another, of course, changing the banking, the business model means, moving from, let's say, the traditional banking, this is mainly for the commercial banks, but moving from the traditional, let's say, banking activity, loans and deposit intermediation, to a more, let's say, consulting activities, services, fee-based model. It is not easy because, you have to change a lot of things, not only, the banking way of making business, but also the demand of financial services from households and firms. You have to change a lot of stuff. There's a direction, of course, there's a reduction in net interest income, but it's very slow. There's an increase in fees and commission, but it's very slow. So, of course, there is a possibility to reduce, let me see, where is it? The cost income. The cost income is very high. So, for example, in the, now the new parameters that also I think the DG Commission is using when, is evaluating this restructuring program is having, in a 5-year time, cost of income around or below 50%. The European banking sector has 64% in these numbers. Having return on equity around 9 to 10%, the return of equity is average is 3 to 4%. So it's a big challenge, and so in my opinion, and not only in my opinion, I think the thing that as the main things that the managers and the top managers are looking for is this topic: how to find a way to improve profitability and to reduce that return on equity gap. Of course, we have to solve the NPL problem. I'm not talking about this because there's another, let's say, section tomorrow. I want to say another thing. The European banking sector, of course, has the NPE problem. It's 1 trillion of NPL. Okay. There's, discussion how to solve it, but we have another issue. I think that the level 3 issue and the level 3 assets in some of the banks, in some of the balance sheet of the banks, look at this graph, is now very low. So in some way, cleaning up the balance sheet has to be a problem not only of NPL, but also of level 3 assets, and sometimes level 2 assets that have to be, let's say, looked more carefully than it was before. I just finish with two words in terms of risk management issue, and basically the role of the risk management in this process. In this, let's say, very difficult environment and this in these new challenges that the banking sector has in Europe, in some countries more than others, but is quite, in my opinion, spread all over Europe. The CRO, let's say, the risk manager department has changed its role. So starting from something, that was measuring limits. I'm looking at Mauro Maccarinelli that has a long, experiences on that. Moving from vertical competencies in order to measure more credit risk, market risk, liquidity risk, operational risk, everything that, is absorbing capital, okay? This is another phase. But now the main challenge of the CRO in the recent years, if you look at, also what has been demanded, is demanding from the regulation and not only, is integrated risk management. So the risk management is very involved today in how to support managerial decision in order to improve the risk-return combination, so reducing risk, improve the return on the asset, let's say, on the portfolio, and doing all and using all those instruments that are stress test instrument, integrated risk among the balance sheet, all these new, let's say, techniques, and not only techniques, that is changing the way out, and also the importance of the risk manager inside the bank and inside the banking top management. And now, and I'm just closing, I can say this, the CRO that is now doing all this kind of new activity, the one that you see on the right-hand side, is something that is dealing more with, let's say, strategic and managerial issues. It's not only the one that is measuring the risk and is, let's say, putting limits on the risk assumption. That, of course, is important. But also create, let's say, what we said, the shareholder value. So the main, let's say, objective is to be very close to the top manager of each company and to help them to take the right decision in order to improve that return on equity situation, then close the return on equity gap that I was showing before. Thanks.